Namaste. My name is Saren Kapoor and I'm with Support Enforcement Services. I have been with the state for 30 years. I'm originally from India and I identify as a Zoroastrian woman.
Buenos dias. My name is Daisy Ortiz and I am with the Court Support Services Division Central Office in Wethersfield. I've been with the branch for 14 years and I identify as a Latina, Puerto Rican, mom, and a salsera. And we are the co-chairs of 2017 Diversity Week.
My name is Troy Brown. I'm with CSSD. I've been with the branch now for about 20 years. I identify myself as a Black Jamaican American male.
My name is Paul Lorenzo. I work for Family Services in Towson County. I've been with the branch about 21 years, and I identify as American with a big, strong Italian heritage.
My name is Priscilla Arroyo. I am with the Court Service Center program at New Haven Superior Court. I have been with the branch for almost 19 years. I identify as Latina.
My name is Elliot Solomon. I am the Deputy Chief Court Administrator. I've been with the branch for 21 years. I identify as a husband, a father of 2, a grandfather of 3. I'm an American. I'm a veteran.
My name is Colette Bungallo, and I was the first Asian American probation officer hired by CSSD, located in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I've been with Judicial for 13 years, and my background is of Cambodian and Buddhist descent.
My name is Phil Strambler. I've been working with Judicial for about 13 years now with the Information Technology Department. I identify myself as a Black American.
My name is Cherise Hutton, and I'm the Director of Support Enforcement Services, the Judicial Branch's child support agency. Although I hail from the Midwest, I identify completely as a New Englander.
My name is Milaya Gazarek. I'm with the Clerk's Office at Towson Superior Court. I have been with the branch for 2 years now and I identify myself as Brazilian.
Hi, my name is Sam Bruder. I am with the Centralized Small Claims Office in Hartford. I've been with the branch for over 11 years now, and I identify as a millennial.
My name is Marshall Birthright. I am with the Judicial Marshals in the New Haven District. I've been with the branch for 5 years and I identify myself as an Asian American citizen.
My name is Derek Rodriguez. I've been working for the state of Connecticut for over 20 years. I've worked for Judicial for 12 years. I identify myself as a proud Puerto Rican American.
My name is Spiro Uyar. I have been working for Judicial for the last 15 years. I am a Christian from Turkey.
My name is Anissa Cutroli. I work for the Family Clerk's Office in Norwich for 4 years. I identify as Albanian.
My name is Roy Smith Jr. I'm the Chief Clerk for the Judicial District of Towson at Rockville. I identify as African American.
I am Isabel Alvarez and I work for the Court Support Service Division, Multicultural Affairs Unit. I have been with the branch for 13 years. I am a Colombian, a female.
My name is Arthur Haddon and I am a judge of the Superior Court. I have been a judge for about 16 years. And I identify myself as an Irish American, and at this time of year, the fall, I identify myself as a football official.
My name is Sean Riley. I'm a judicial marshal. I've worked here 18 years, and I'm African American.
My name's Jody DiCrescenzo, and I've been with Support Enforcement for 37 years. I am a Jewish woman.
I'm Jim Vogel, and I'm with the Judicial Branch Information Technology Division. I've been with the Judicial Branch for 19 years, and I am of German and Polish descent.
My name is Sheila Prats, and I am a Superior Court Judge. I am presently assigned to the Towson Judicial District. My assignment right now is doing criminal and some family and maybe juvenile. I have been with the branch for 3 years, and I identify as Puerto Rican.
My name is Cesar Ballou. I am a temporary assistant clerk at the New Haven Superior Court. I am gay, Albanian, and Muslim.
My name is Jean Kelly Cummings. I'm with the Reporter of Judicial Decisions. I've been with the branch for 10 years. I identify as an American, a New Englander, a wife, a mother, and a lover of books.
Hello, my name is Joy M. Flynn. I am with the Judicial Marshal Branch in New Haven, Connecticut. I have been with the branch for 13 plus years. I identify as an African American. I am a soul sister.
My name's Gary Roberge. I work with the Court Support Services Division. I've been with the Judicial Branch. I'm starting my 30th year this September, and I identify as a white male.
Hi, my name is Carolina Marin. I am an administrative assistant here at Jury Administration. I am originally from Peru, and I recently became a U.S. citizen.
I am Shams Akbarzai. I work for ITD for almost 13 years. I'm from Afghanistan, and I'm a Muslim.
My name is Dawn Westbrook. I am the administrative judge of the Tallinn Judicial District. I have been with the branch for 8 years. I identify as African American.
My name is Eva Vojevodsky. I work for Court Service Center, New Britain Court. I'm with Judicial about 20 years. Originally, I came from Poland about 37 years ago.
Hi, my name is Del Martinez. I've been with the state of Connecticut for over 23 years. 11 of those have been with Support Enforcement Services. I identify myself as a Latino gay male.
My name is John Colella. I am the Chief Family Support Magistrate for the state of Connecticut Superior Court Judicial Branch. I sit primarily in the New Haven Superior Court. I've been with the branch for 16 years. I identify as a loving father, husband. I am second generation Italian, half and half second generation French Canadian.
My name is Shalu Rajan. I'm an attorney with the Public Defender Services. I've been here in Bridgeport GA2 for the last 6 years. I've been working for the state of Connecticut for almost 10 years. I identify myself as Indian.
My name is Amalia Castillo. I am a judicial interpreter working for Connecticut's Judicial Branch. I am originally from El Salvador and my native language is Spanish.
Hi, my name is Richard Robinson. I'm a Justice of the Connecticut Supreme Court. I'm also the chairperson of the Advisory Committee on Cultural Competency. I've been an employee of the branch for about going on 18 years now, so I've been here for quite a while. In our past few years, we've been doing a lot about diversity. We realize that we have one of the most diverse workforces in the entire state of Connecticut, if not in the entire country. We also learned that people, when they deal with the branch, want to be treated in a fair manner. So whether we're in our micro world of employees or the outside world dealing with stakeholders with the judicial branch, we have to be fair to all those involved and treat everybody with dignity and respect and recognize their culture and their differences. It's their differences that make us great. So thank you from the committee. You're doing a wonderful job, and I think we are so far ahead of where we were years ago. The work will never be truly done, but we'll always be working at it. Thank you.
We are Judicial.
We are Judicial.
We are Judicial.
We
are
Judicial.
We are Judicial.
Thank you. So, as stated in the video, my name is Daisy Ortiz.
And I'm Zaren Kapoor.
We are the co-chairs for this year's 2017 Judicial Branch Diversity Week. Can everyone hear me, by the way? I want to lean down. So good morning again, and welcome to opening ceremonies of Diversity Week 2017. We are honored to welcome the Chief Justice of Connecticut, Chase T. Rogers, Justice Richard A. Robinson, Chief Court Administrator, Judge Patrick Carroll, Deputy Chief Court Administrator, Judge Elliott Solomon, our key honored note speaker, Justice Lubbie Harper, Superior Court judges, family support magistrates, executive directors, honored guests, and all judicial branch employees. This year's theme is building a culture of inclusion, which means making sure that everyone's voice is important, embracing people from all backgrounds and cultures, and making sure they are valued and respected. Diversity Week 2017 will highlight and celebrate the differences that come with diversity, which includes, but is not limited to, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, geography, socioeconomic status, gender, religion, and disabilities. Having these conversations will help build a foundation within the branch where differences are not only acknowledged, but are embraced, and will foster a stronger, more productive workforce that is sensitive to the values and responsive to the needs of all who interact with us.
We are honored to report some achievements already set by this year's Diversity Week events. 2017 opening day ceremony has reached the highest number of registrants than any prior year. For the first time, we are offering 2 workshops later this afternoon. Of the 16 workshops throughout the week, 7 of them are new workshop topics. 5 workshops have reached capacity, and that happened within the first 3 weeks. We had a number of workshops where we had to increase the capacity because of the high demand. Instead of just lectures, we have introduced a visit to the New Haven Museum on Amistad, viewing of the Netflix documentary 13th with a discussion to follow, and we have a visit of 3 religious sites with bus transportation and lunch included. We hope you and your colleagues will take advantage of this week, all that this week has to offer. The success in planning of this year's event has been because of the hard work of the Diversity Week subcommittee members. Can all the members of the subcommittee please stand and be recognized? And lastly, we would, the members of the JBACC committee, the Judicial Branch Advisory Committee on Cultural Competency, has also provided so much support to us during the last several months. Can you all please stand and be recognized? And lastly, we would like to thank Rocky Dayhart, our intern from Middlesex Community College, for the work he has done in filming and editing the opening video. Without further delay, we are going to start the morning. And at this point, it is my distinct honor to introduce to you Chief Justice Chase T. Rogers.
Good morning. My name is Chase Rogers, and I identify as incredibly lucky to work with all of you. I am not a crier, but So, Zorin and Daisy, thank you so much for your warm welcome and also for serving as co-chairs of this year's Diversity Day Planning Committee. I'm extremely appreciative of all your hard work and that of the entire committee. Additionally, thank you, Justice Robinson. Where are you? There you are. For your leadership as chairperson of the Advisory Committee on Cultural Competency since July of 2010. It's been a long time now. Before I go any further, I also want to thank all of the employees who are here today for the opening celebration of Diversity Week. We know these are very difficult times. The budget crisis continues to impact the branch, and yet you all continue to rise to the occasion. I'm so thankful for your dedication and commitment to serving the public, despite the branch having lost so many employees over the last year. It's a testament to your commitment that you took time out of your very busy day to attend, and I also want to thank your supervisors for approving your absence from the office, as I'm acutely aware every day that we're asking all of you to do more with less. Unfortunately, I'm not only concerned about the budget crisis that we have on the state level, I'm also extremely concerned about what's happening on the national level in terms of dialogue and action. For me, the events over the past year around the country have magnified just how important it is to listen to each other, to cultivate constructive dialogue, and to learn about and embrace our differences. By becoming a more culturally competent workforce, we, in no uncertain terms, reject becoming a microcosm of the bias and stereotyping which has resulted in the miscommunication and incivility occurring coast to coast. It was against this backdrop that I decided to move forward with the human capital phase of the Judicial Branch's strategic plan. The purpose of this phase is to understand how our workforce manages their complex personal lives with your career paths, your aspirations and goals, and then identify how the branch can be helpful in achieving a healthy work-life balance. As a result, we developed a survey, as you know, for employees, which many of you completed last year. I knew from the start that there would never be a quote-unquote good time to do the survey, considering that the ongoing budgetary problems show no sign of easing anytime soon. Yet I firmly believe that understanding how all of you feel about your work experience during difficult times will make the branch that much stronger. Our goal with this survey was to first measure your satisfaction and engagement with your job and work environment. Secondly, we wanted to identify ways in which the judicial branch can support you and make improvements that will enhance your experience. Basically, we want to know what is within our ability to make a positive difference for you as a judicial branch employee. I also believe that enhancing your job satisfaction will enhance the branch's overall ability to better serve all of the individuals that you serve. This is such important work that you do. Essentially, you are ensuring that the people who rely on our courts have meaningful access to justice. So, how are we using the feedback on the survey to reach the goals? The first thing we did was to analyze the results of the survey, and I'm pleased to report that in the area of diversity, nearly 80% of you responded that you agreed or strongly agreed that the judicial branch has a culturally diverse workforce. On the other hand, 62% agreed or strongly agreed that judicial branch programs effectively promote the importance of a diverse workforce, a figure that tells me that there's more work ahead of us, despite being recognized as a leader in the nation in cultural competency and diversity training. So we're now in the process of gathering additional feedback from the focus groups, and as such, I want to personally invite each of you to participate in one of these groups. And note that you don't have to have filled out the survey to do so. So if you can get the time to do so, it would really be very helpful. It's especially important that a diverse group of staff participates. We need all of your voices at the table to set a course that benefits not just one group, but rather the tapestry of people that we are and the different experiences and valued backgrounds that we all represent. So I anticipate that the programs and the training that will occur today and all of this week will encourage these types of inclusive discussions. With that, you have a very full day ahead of you. I'm looking forward to hearing from two of my favorite colleagues, Justice Robinson and your keynote speaker, Justice Lubbie Harper. So I first did this 10 years ago, and so I'm proud to be here today, and I want to thank you again for allowing me to address you.
Thank you, Chief Justice Rogers. It is my honor to introduce the Honorable Richard A. Robinson. Justice Robinson is the chairperson of the Judicial Branch Advisory Committee on Cultural Competency since 2009 until present. Under his leadership, the committee has been instrumental in providing a number of trainings and workshops on cultural competency. Justice Robinson has been the driving force and has been very supportive of this program, so it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you all Justice Richard A. Robinson.
Thank you very much. I want to thank you all for coming today. I also want to chastise you because when I was keynote speaker, half of you weren't here. You're here for Justice Harper. We're in constant competition. That's okay, brother. You got me this time. So, and I'm also surprised to know that I've been on the chair since 2009, 2010. I just told the report it was about 4 years. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful chairmanship, and the committee is absolutely incredible. But we couldn't do what we do without the chief doing what she does. We are a leader, a national leader in cultural competency. There's a person here I must recognize, my co-trainer. We've done quite a few programs. Actually, we're going around the country at this point. We just did one in Vermont. We did 3 in Vermont, actually, because people are reaching out from all over the country asking us to come to them to speak and say, what is the judicial branch doing? It looks very special. We need to do that same kind of a thing. And that is, and I almost called her Justice, Judge Maria Khan, my good friend. I will not tease her at this point about her stay on the appellate court, but she knows what I'm thinking. So why do we do this? Why is diversity important? I think the introductory film says a lot about that. The judicial branch is a very, very diverse environment. And that's a great thing.
But the thing is, we don't always communicate together the way we should. We don't always view each other like we should. Those of you who have been to my trainings before know that we look at each other when we initially meet a person as the tip of the iceberg. We know about 10% of what that person does and who that person is. You don't know my core values when you see me on the street. I do this line that's sort of half joking. When you see me, you see a black man. You see a really good-looking black man. But you see a black man. Yeah, some of you thinking, Luke Cage. That's all right, that's good, that's good. As my friend once said to me, yeah, from the neck up. Luke Cage is slightly buff, just, you know. But anyway, that's the reason why this is important. And it's important because we serve the people of the state of Connecticut. And the people of the state of Connecticut are a very diverse group of people. We are just a microcosm of that. We reflect that. One of the things I tell people is that the only reason why the judicial branch has any power at all, is because people trust us and they give us that power. So imagine if they stopped trusting us. We don't have an army to support our rulings. People support our rulings because they believe we're going to be fair. And if they don't believe we're fair because we have implicit bias or because we insult them accidentally, we're lost. So there's a real point to all this, and that is doing our jobs to the best of our abilities and making sure that we are fair to the people who come before us. Now, I'm going to talk about our speaker for today, who's a very, very good friend of mine, and I will tell you, I am biased when it comes to this man because he has been my mentor ever since I got on the branch. I remember the day I met Lubbie Harper. We were in New Haven. I had just been assigned to the New Haven JD, and he came down to my chamber and said, do you need anything? How are you doing? I'm here to make sure you're okay. And I didn't think much of it. I thought it was nice, but I didn't think much of it at the time. But recently I've been thinking about that a lot. I attended a program not that long ago where the keynote speaker was a presidential advisor of Barack Obama's. And he started his speech with this old Greek saying, society prospers when old men plant trees for shade in which they will never sit. I want to change that a little bit. Society prospers when people plant trees for shade in which they will never sit. We do this not for us, not just for us, but for the generations that will come after us. I've had a lot of conversations lately because there's been some pushback in the last year, some severe pushback from some young people saying, you know what, I don't believe in any of this. And I said, really? And I took that in stride, but then one young man told me, you know, things are much better than they used to be. Look at you, you're a Supreme Court justice. He says, I don't believe in any of this nonsense. And I said, you don't get to say that. You get to say many things, but you don't get to say that. You don't know my experience. You don't know who I am. You don't know how I'm feeling. You have never, ever, ever felt the slings and arrows of a racist. And he looked shocked because I sort of shifted from my judge's role to my personal role. My good friend Maria Khan whispered to me, willow tree, Rick, willow tree. We have this running, ongoing thing where we talk to each other, and sometimes it gets a little rough for us. And I started this, to be honest, but I said to Judge Khan once, I said, Maria, willow tree. And she didn't know what I was saying, but what I was saying was this. If there's a strong wind, a hurricane, the willow tree bends and snaps back. So sometimes we have to be the willow, but sometimes we have to be the oak. This was not an oak moment. This was a willow tree moment. So we ended up talking to that young man for a good half hour, 45 minutes. And I think we started to bring him around to see a different view of the world. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We don't have to always agree, but we have to keep talking. We absolutely have to do that. So I was going to come here and I was going to read Justice Harper's vitae. And that would take about 45 minutes, which would be longer than his speech. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to say hello to my mentor, my friend, Lubbie Harper.
Thank you, Justice Robinson, for your kind introduction. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and employees of the Judicial Branch.
Good morning.
First and foremost, let me just say what an honor it is to be here today as the keynote speaker for the kickoff ceremony for the Judicial Branch Diversity Week. In addition, I must note that it's truly a privilege to have the opportunity to address you today regarding this year's theme, a theme which is close to my heart, namely building a culture of inclusion. I also want to thank Justice Robinson for inviting me to kick off this week's event as the keynote speaker. In his humble way, Justice Robinson honored me by asking me to address you this morning. I received an inordinate number of requests to speak and have attempted to cut down on my speaking engagements. However, there's simply no way I could say no to Justice Robinson's request. I have so much respect for him, his judicial philosophy, and for all he has done throughout his illustrative career to make a difference. Justice Robinson is committed to the goal of diversity and cultural competency. He is serious about these issues. And for him, these issues are much more than a platform for judicial jargon. Justice Robinson is committed to creating an environment in our society and in our judicial system where there's an unyielding respect, appreciation, and acceptance of differences, whether they are cultural, racial, or otherwise. Furthermore, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize, acknowledge, and thank my longtime friend and colleague, Chief Justice Chase Rogers, for her unyielding commitment to make a difference. Under Justice Rogers' leadership, Connecticut Judicial Branch has been recognized nationally as a responsive judiciary. She has not only embraced a culture of diversity, but it is her expectation that the judicial branch will exemplify and embrace diversity and inclusion as an institution. In addition, as noted in her remarks, she has demonstrated not only an understanding of the importance of diversity and inclusion, but has also launched a series of initiatives to make a difference. Initiatives consistent with her view that access to justice is a fundamental right. In that regard, under her stewardship, the branch has made targeted changes to ensure equal access for all people, including low and moderate income individuals as well as ethnic, cultural, and racial minorities. During her tenure, we have seen the restructuring of the civil and family court dockets, increased diversity in the branch workforce, and increased diversity on the bench. She is to be commended because of all of these initiatives are designed to increase cultural competency, transparency, respect for multiculturalism, and access to justice. I must also acknowledge, recognize, and thank Governor Malloy for his understanding of the importance of diversity and inclusion, and for his unyielding commitment to diversify our judiciary. His commitment has gone beyond words, but has been made evident by the diversity represented in particular on our Supreme and Appellate Courts. His understanding of the significance of diversity and inclusion has been demonstrated throughout his term as governor of our great state. To members of the Judicial Branch Advisory Committee on Cultural Competency, I would like to note that I'm quite aware of the wonderful work you have done during and continue to do, exploring the critical subject of cultural competency under the sterling leadership of my good friend and colleague, Justice Robinson. I truly appreciate all that you have done to make this day, as well as this week, measurable not only for myself, but for everybody in attendance. Planning an event such as this with speakers and breakout sessions is no easy task. I fully anticipate that you will end the week feeling satisfied that the time you spent here was well worth it, and I hope that my remarks assist you in your exploration. As I think about the theme of this conference, I'm compelled to think about the definition of diversity and inclusion. I'm reminded that diversity has been defined by some to mean all the ways we differ. Some of these differences we are born with and cannot change. Anything that makes us unique is part of this definition. Inclusion, on the other hand, involves bringing together and harnessing these diverse forces and resources in a way that is beneficial. Inclusion puts the concept and practice of diversity into action by creating an environment of involvement, respect, connection, where the richness of ideas, backgrounds, perspectives are harnessed to create value. Using these definitions as a contextual framework coupled with the theme of this conference, I am convinced that building a culture of inclusion, where diversity and inclusion are accepted by everyone, is an enduring challenge for our nation and for Connecticut's judicial branch. I'm reminded that our nation is in the midst of a moral and cultural crisis. I'm reminded that our nation is divided by strongly held beliefs and opinions. I'm reminded that voters and politicians are polarized. Compromise has become an unacceptable concept. I'm reminded that our core democratic values are under attack. Values which includes ideal concepts such as liberty, equality, justice, diversity, and inclusions. Values which are designed to unite, not divide. And the polarization does not exist merely in the world of ideas. It has taken on an ugly reality. I'm reminded of the despicable, repugnant, and sickening display of hatred, bigotry, and violence that occurred in Charlottesville, Virginia on August 12th of this year. Hate groups such as the Ku Klux Klan, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists marched, waving Nazi flags, wearing helmets, carrying shields and firearms. They marched with the lit tiki torches in their hands, something which was remnants of KKK rallies and mob lynching, chanting racist slogans such as "Jews will not replace us," and "blood and soil." These groups are determined to undermine and destroy the values that make this country a beacon of hope for all. Domestic terrorism, hate, bigotry, racism, xenophobia, and anti-Semitism are anathema to the values of diversity and inclusion and have no place in our country. Yes, such demonstrations are a vivid reminder that building a culture of inclusion is an enduring challenge, especially when we have dissidents among us who view diversity and inclusion as initiatives that are tantamount to white genocide. Building a culture of inclusion is an enduring challenge when we have those among us who believe that white Christian ideals are threatened by ethnic diversity and multiculturalism. Building a culture of inclusion is an enduring challenge when we have some governmental leaders who demonstrate disrespect for the rule of law, refuse to discuss critical issues, stoke division, and trample on our constitutional liberties, equating the exercise of one constitutional right to peacefully protest against racial injustice as tantamount to a lack of patriotism, undermines the rule of law, and militates against our efforts to build a culture of inclusion. Yes, building a culture of inclusion is an enduring challenge. We're faced with an unbridled and disturbing public resurgence of hatred, bigotry, violence, and racism. The pathetic chasm reminds us that our nation continues to experience a racial, social, economic, political, and cultural divide of epic proportion. I'm reminded that our country continues to grapple with the many tentacles of race relations and the need for systematic reform and honest and frank discussion regarding race, the ideology of white supremacy, and the lingering effects of slavery is long overdue. I am not so naive, however, to think that we can ever reason with or change the minds of hardened bigots. We should rely on statutory enactments and our judicial system to deal with their legal and invidious attacks. I do, however, believe that now is the time for good people, people of goodwill, who believe in justice and equality for all, to engage in such a discussion among people of all color, all faith, and all ethnicity. People who believe that diversity and inclusion are essential values to the fabric of our nation. For if we are to have a diverse and inclusive society that is celebrated and truly equal, then we must have consensus that the recognition, acceptance, and appreciation of these values enhances the richness of America. We should not, however, delude ourselves. The task of building a culture of inclusion is challenging. Challenging because of, among other things, there are many folks, some of whom are in positions of power and influence, who simply refuse to accept the reality of the changing demographics of our country. Yes, our nation is in the midst of a major racial and ethnic shift. The United States population is becoming more racially and ethnically diverse. Yes, someday soon, surely much sooner than most people realize, white Americans will become a minority group. Long before that day arrives, the presumption that the typical U.S. citizen is someone who traces his or her descent in a direct line to Europe will become a relic of history. I posit that by the time our students in high school reach midlife their diverse ethnic experience in the classroom will be echoed in neighborhoods and workplaces throughout the United States to a far greater extent than it is today. By 2020, more than half of the nation's children are expected to be a part of a minority race or ethnic group. When that shift as a whole takes place by 2044, the Consensus Bureau predicts that no one racial or ethnic group will dominate the United States in terms of size. This racial and ethnic shift in America has and will continue to alter everything in society, from politics and education to industry, values, and culture. Therefore, we, both as individuals and as a court system, must prepare ourselves to deal with this ever-shifting trend in the racial and ethnic complexion of our nation and the economic, social, and political realities of this phenomena. So against this realistic trend, it is clear that we have work to do. The continuous, troubling, polarizing, and divisive rhetoric by hate groups and some national leaders must be denounced. Yes, those of us who are committed to diversity and inclusion are facing a daunting challenge. The challenge is real. In fact, the challenge is enduring. Yet those of us who are committed to the principles of diversity and inclusion must create an environment, work or otherwise, that is better and more reflective and responsive to a culturally diverse population. We must respond to the challenge by doubling down and facing those challenges with a new sense of urgency and commitment. We must rid ourselves of many biases and preconceived notions among those among us who are different. And to be sure, we cannot build a culture of inclusion unless we recognize that diversity and inclusion, with all of its challenges, are topics that must be addressed. They must be addressed because their importance to the future of our nation cannot be underestimated. As America races towards a future where so-called minorities will be the majority and more marginalized groups make their voices heard, our nation, as well as Connecticut's judicial branch, as a co-equal branch of our state government, must double down on its efforts to advance diversity by producing viable, sustainable, and measurable outcomes. We're fortunate that our judicial branch, under the committed leadership of our Chief Justice, the wisdom of our Chief Court Administrator, and the stewardship of Justice Robinson, has made significant strides to promote diversity and to build a culture of inclusion. However, our challenge now, despite our significant efforts thus far, is to sharpen our focus and to build on our progress. We do this by renewing our commitment to diversity and inclusion and view it as an integral part of our mission. We do this by recognizing that our greatest assets is our employees. We do this by participating in the branch focus group program, in which you have the opportunity to honestly express your opinions about a range of topics. This program seeks your opinion about what the branch does well and what should be changed with regard to promotion, transfers, and hiring. This program seeks your opinion about your level of involvement with decision-making that affects you. This program seeks your opinion about what the branch can do to attract and retain one of its vital tools, its valued employees. Participation in this kind of initiative will help the branch to create a more responsive work environment. Participation in this kind of initiative will help the branch to create a work environment where our employees feel valued and psychologically safe. Such an environment will allow our employees to be who they are. It will allow them to feel secure. It will allow them to express their true feelings about a host of work-related issues without feeling that they have to fake it to fit a particular mindset. Equally important is the need to create respect for dissenting voices so that our diverse population does not feel the need to assimilate, thus silencing the vibrant voices of diversity. I dare say that such an environment will cause our employees to feel valued and will result in an increase of productivity, job satisfaction, and retention. Moreover, we have to determine whether certain racial and ethnic groups, sexual and gender minorities, and people with disabilities are vastly underrepresented at every level and across every division of our judicial branch. If so, we have to develop an action plan to correct such disparity, because such disproportional representation can have the unintended consequences of developing policies and procedures that has failed to sufficiently encompass the vast array of knowledge, experience, perspectives of these groups. Yes, building a culture of inclusion is an enduring challenge. It requires more than assisting judicial employees to become culturally competent. Building a culture of inclusion requires more than creating an environment where the judicial branch and its employees are able to communicate, cooperate, and serve people from all cultural identities with respect to professionalism, integrity, and fairness in a manner that recognizes the individual dignity of each person. Building a culture of inclusion requires, among other things, an unyielding commitment to listening to, understanding, and considering the ideas and thought processes of marginalized groups. This is extremely important because participation by such groups in the development of procedures and policies will result in a more sensitive and responsive work product. In fact, such participation will cause members of marginalized groups to feel valued, appreciated, and respected. Such participation will lend integrity to the process, will cause persons to perceive the process as fair, and will assist in our efforts to build a culture of inclusion. You see, I'm convinced that not only should our judicial system represent and mirror the population it serves, but it should also involve its diverse workforce in the making of critical decisions. For if it does not, then the growing majority of our diverse workforce will lose faith and confidence in the branch efforts to build a culture of inclusion. Those of us who work in the judicial branch strive to perform our duties in a fair, timely, efficient, and open manner. Yes, I believe it is equally vital that we are perceived as worthy of the faith and confidence reposed in us by the individuals and greater society that we serve. Yes, building a culture of inclusion is an enduring challenge. However, it's a challenge that we should embrace if we are truly committed to making a difference. So the question is, what are we going to do? I first suggest that those who are oblivious to the benefits of diversity and inclusion wake up, pull their heads out of the sand, and recognize its advantages and commit themselves to making a difference. Bottom line, it's not acceptable that the goal of diversity and inclusion is still unacceptable by those who are determined to maintain a status quo by keeping marginalized groups outside of the mainstream of work life. So the need to move forward with action rather than words is now. Yes, now is the time not to be silent. Silence and inaction are the fertile soil in which hate and intolerance take root. It is time to not only expect action from others, but to expect action from yourself as we continue our efforts to build a culture of inclusion. I am confident that if you actively promote diversity at this point in your careers, it will become a lifelong quest. And really, to do otherwise would run counter to the mission of a judicial branch to do justice for all. Ladies and gentlemen, diversity and inclusion implicates our humanity and goes straight to the heart of the quality of justice we should want for all. It is the main artery. So consider my message today as a call to duty. It should not take a catastrophic natural disaster like Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria to unite us or for us to realize our common humanity. It should not take the mass murder like the unthinkable tragedy that occurred in Las Vegas to remind us that what you look like, sound like, who you love, or what God you worship is irrelevant to our common humanity. Yes, we need to continue to promote diversity and inclusion as a source of strength and richness in our branch. With diversity, with knowledge and an understanding of one another in our life experiences, we have the opportunity to challenge those who feed on bigotry and hate. The values of diversity and inclusion, once embraced, will lead to an appreciation of human and cultural differences. It is a source of national strength. It is a concept that can increase our sensitivity and awareness, enrich our lives, increase our knowledge, expand the scope of our understanding, and improve the quality of our lives in so many different ways. Former President Jimmy Carter once said, and I agree, we are, of course, a nation of differences. Those differences don't make us weak. They are the source of our strength. This strength has particular implications not only for our society, but also for those of us involved in the judicial system. The judicial system and the people we serve represent a microcosm of our greater society. Our system of justice should serve as a beacon for promoting fairness and civil rights. With the Constitution as our mantra, we should tear down the obstacles of inclusion. We should tear down the obstacles that prevent society in general, and individuals in particular, for acceptably and concomitantly reaping the benefits of diversity and inclusion. Unless we develop respect, understanding, and appreciation for differences, and respect, understanding, and appreciation for people who do not look the same, think the same, act the same, talk the same, or whose life experiences are different than our own, we will merely pay lip service to the concepts of equal justice and inclusiveness. Thus, we will fail to truly live up to these lofty American ideals. Diversity and inclusion is tantamount to treating everyone with dignity. It's tantamount to treating everyone with respect. Respect for differences. Respect for differences within our branch, as well as respect for the people we serve. Those who fear diversity and inclusion, and those who degrade its values, and those who fail to appreciate its amazing advantages are depriving themselves of a wonderful opportunity to grow, to develop, and to expand their understanding and knowledge of the beauty of the different array of human experiences. How do you learn? How do you grow? How do you teach respect and humility? How do you experience all that life has to offer if you segregate yourself from the wonderment of diversity and the grandeur of inclusion? Segregation of the mind is just as serious and as insidious as any other form of segregation. Segregation of the mind breeds fear, resentment, anger. It serves as a justification not only for a fearful and angry thoughts, but at times violent behavior. Diversity and inclusion in our judicial branch is a necessary imperative. It is a human blessing. And it is an imperative that we will allow us the opportunity to challenge those who feed on bigotry and hatred. We have the opportunity to echo the extraordinary remarks of Air Force Lieutenant General J. Severia that occurred on September 28th at the 10th Air Base Wing in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Speaking with electrifying clarity, he told more than 5,000 students, staff, and Air Force officers in reaction to written racist slurs on a message board at the Academy's prep school that prejudice, bigotry, and intolerance cannot be allowed to go unchallenged. We must defy those who undermine the value of diversity and inclusion with their prejudice, bigotry, and intolerance. We have the opportunity as members of Connecticut's judicial branch to make a difference. We have the opportunity to declare to our system of justice, our community, and our society the wonderment of diversity and the grandeur of inclusion. We have the opportunity to dismantle the forces that seek to prevent us from building one America. We have the opportunity to make a declaration that diversity and inclusion is a public good, a pronouncement which says that our strength as a people, as a system of justice, and a society resides within our differences. We can all learn from each other. We must inspire, we must serve, and we must let the mountains ring with our message of diversity and inclusion. We will make this journey together, regardless of race, religion, cultural, or creed, to promote the values of diversity. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "I have a dream." I say, we should have a dream for a better society, for a more inclusive system of justice, a dream which illuminates the diversity of God's oasis, a wonderful source of potential, replete with a vast array of human knowledge. And if we accept the wonderment of our diversity and seek to build a culture of inclusion, we will all become receptive to removing shackles from our minds, shackles which prevent us from understanding and learning from each other. Each one of us has had unique life experiences. Each one of us, because of our differences, may serve as a fertile soil of knowledge because of the wonderment of our diversity. This is an opportunity we cannot waste, and one that can be achieved only through honest dialogue. Yes, it may be painful at times, but only then can we achieve full and productive results. Our nation as a whole, and our judicial branch in particular, must continue to strive tirelessly to promote meaningful job opportunities to men and women of color and different ethnicities so that we can enrich our society and our branch of government. Ronald Reagan once said that whether we come from poverty or wealth, whether we are Afro-Americans or Irish Americans, Christians or Jews, from big cities or small towns, we are all equal in the eyes of God. But as Americans, that's not enough. We must be equal in the eyes of each other. We can no longer judge each other on the basis of what we are, but instead start finding out who we are. In America, our origins matter less than our destination, and that is what democracy is all about. These words graphically reflect the values necessary to build a culture of inclusion. They represent democratic values, values that are indeed noble, values that we spread throughout our community. and among our family and friends. Values that require us to embrace the unique worth of all of God's children. In our effort to build a culture of inclusion, we should reach out to our young people and teach them the values associated with diversity and inclusion, for they are the hope for our future. We must serve as role models for our youngsters, particularly those who may be at risk. As members of the judicial branch, we are in a perfect position to help our youngsters realize advantages of diversity and inclusion. Efforts to promote diversity starts with an awareness and a change in thinking. And I hope events such as Diversity Week will serve as a call to action. We have to choose to make a difference, to be a voice that works towards and demands diversity. All of us deserve nothing less, particularly in a society where fringe groups sometimes assume they speak for everybody. They don't. Eldridge Cleaver once said, "You are either part of the problem or part of the solution." Clearly, we still have societal problems, but by being here today, you are choosing to be part of the solution. Yet keep in mind that one day or 1 week of speeches and workshop isn't enough. Follow through with passion and direction and know that diversity and inclusion will never be a reality unless all people of goodwill take a stand. I stand united with you as you move forward today to make a tangible and measurable difference. I stand united with you today as you strive to embrace the mosaic of diversity and the grandeur of inclusion. I stand united with you today and implore you to embrace the wonderment of diversity and the beauty of inclusion. Concepts of embrace can transform, if not catapult, ignorance into understanding, indifference into an appreciation, and intolerance into acceptance. If these concepts are embraced, they can infuse much needed faith, trust, and confidence into Connecticut's judicial branch. If these concepts are embraced, they can highlight and give new meaning to the branch's core values of respect, professionalism, integrity, and fairness. If these concepts are embraced, they will cause us to realize our dream of building a culture of inclusion and thereby help our branch, our state, and our country to live up to one of its loftiest ideals. Thank you. Good? You did all right? Okay. What we do, Jay?
You did it.
You did it, go there? Thank you, Jay. Love you, man. You did. You gotta make you proud. Gotta make you proud, too.
In a moment, I'm going to give Justice Harper a token of our appreciation. But before I do that, I'm going to just take a point of personal privilege and say hello to some people that I've noticed in the audience. The first is Juelle Harper, Justice Harper's wonderful wife. And the reason why, and his son. And his son is, I didn't realize he was here until I just looked at him and said, wait a minute, there's Lubbie there. And Lubbie's son is here also. I also want to say hello to a good friend of mine who's been a friend for many years, Rachel Goldberg. Rachel probably doesn't think much of this, but Rachel actually taught me how to help crew a yacht. And that was a moment of diversity that was really interesting because your plan was to get a crew together of people who knew how to sail and people who didn't know how to sail. And the fact that folks like me, you know, dark skin who doesn't know how to sail, sailing with some people some ritzy people from Grenache. Well, thank you, Rachel, for being a wonderful friend all these years. I won't say how many years because then I'll say how old we are. But thank you so much for being my friend.
I also want to say hello to Lou Brown. Lou Brown is a trailblazer in the media and a pioneer in diversity in the media. Lou, thank you so much for all that you've done during your lifetime. There are also some of my fellow judges here, and I'm glad to see you, Judge Doyle, Judge Cradle, Judge Robinson. Who else? Okay. Thank you very much for being here and the work that you do to make sure that the branch is culturally competent and does justice for all. I really appreciate that. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say hello to the President of the Connecticut Bar Association, Karen DiMiola. Oh, there is one more. I'm sorry. I'll be here all day. But Bill Prout. A lot of you folks don't know who Bill Prout is. Bill Prout, please stand up, Bill. Bill Prout is an attorney at Wigan and Dana. Bill has done more for diversity and inclusion than anyone else that I know. And he does not stand and ask for accolades. He does. He just does the work. And he's just an incredible guy, and he's done so much for us. Thank you, Bill. Now, I started out my remarks earlier by saying that society prospers when people plant trees for shades that they know they will never sit in. Justice Harper, thank you for planting strong trees that will last many generations. I'd like to give you a small token of our appreciation. After his speech was over, I whispered in his ear because I love the way Justice Harper talks. He has this cadence, and it reminds me of being in church. And so you folks who go to Southern Baptist Church know exactly what I'm talking about. But I've been to church this morning. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Heather Cato. I'm a member of the Advisory Committee on Cultural Competency. Welcome to the presentation on Cross Cultural Competency in the Workplace. It begins with you. It is my distinct honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Joelle Murchison. She is the Associate Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at the University of Connecticut. Reporting directly to the President, Susan Herbst, Joelle serves as the university's main strategist, responsible for guiding efforts to define, assess, and promote diversity, inclusion, and educational and employment access and opportunity. Prior to joining UConn, Joelle served as Vice President of Enterprise Diversity and Inclusion at the Travelers Companies Incorporated, where in partnership with management, she developed the framework of the company's diversity and inclusion focus and led the execution of Travelers' diversity and inclusion strategy. Joelle previously served 2 terms on the board of directors of both the Morgan State University Foundation and Leadership Greater Hartford, and spent 10 years as a diversity trainer with the Anti-Defamation League, a World of Difference Institute. Joelle is the recipient of numerous awards, including most recently the Trailblazer Award from the Voices of Women of Color. Additionally, Joelle serves as a director trustee on the boards of the Amistad Center for Art and Culture in Hartford, the Discovery Center in College Possible, a national nonprofit focused on college access. A native of Queens and Long Island, New York, Joelle holds a bachelor's degree in public policy and educational studies from Brown University, a master's of education degree from Harvard University's Graduate School of Education, and a master's of science degree in communication management from Syracuse University. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Joelle Murchison.
Walk around a lot, so I'm going to try and not trip over the wires, and hopefully everyone can hear me. Can everyone hear me?
wonderful introduction and really extending the invitation to me to join you all here. As you heard through my bio, I have spent most of my career doing work that is connected to breaking down barriers to access for underrepresented populations, whether it be in higher education, in the corporate sector, now back in higher education. So it really is an honor and a privilege to come and spend some time with all of you as you wrestle with those issues within your own discipline or industry. I should say, and I just actually confirmed with him that I was going to call him out because my ex-husband and co-parent is in the office with many of you, Stephen Hayes, and he is not here. So I said, okay, your entire office is here. I'm just curious as to where you are. And you said to make sure that those of you from the Hartford office know that you've already discussed this topic. I was like, okay. So all of you have my questions will when you return to the office. I actually have lived in Connecticut now for over 20 years, and so though I'm very proudly from New York, I have finally decided this year that I should embrace Connecticut. And so I do really feel a real connection to this work and how it plays out here. As you all know, Connecticut is a very racially segregated and socioeconomically segregated state. It's important for us to get that out there when we talk about any conversation about bias or cultural competency, because where we begin, literally, is what helps to navigate us through this work. And whether or not you realize it, and hopefully as I go through some of the slides that I'll share today, what did I do? Yes. No. Oh, okay. Oh, good. So Steve's name is on there. And okay, good. I'm just kidding. But, you know, one of the things that you'll realize as we go through this work today, I hope, whether you have those aha moments today or this morning or next week, as you think about this, is that so much of what we decide about people that we interact with today is based upon what we've learned or what we've experienced or been exposed to, or what we haven't been exposed to. So I'm going to just take you through some slides that I have to share. I did a little bit of research about the court system in particular, hopefully to make it relevant, but also to provide you with some resources at the end of the day that you can use when you go back to your offices. So let me grab my clicker. Okay, so the reason that the slide talks about it begins with you is literally each and every one of us play a significant role in helping to create an inclusive workplace. This is the case whether we're talking about on a university campus or whether you're talking about a corporate setting or simply in the courts. We all make a lot of assumptions every single day. When I do workshops with young people, and I might be able to do it in here, but you probably will know what I'm saying automatically. I'll sometimes say, you know, so I'm going to throw out the name of a town in Connecticut. You tell me right off the top of your head 3 words what you think of that town. So you know, I think I will try it with you. I won't make the assumption that you'll already know what I mean. Okay? So I'm going to throw out a town, and I need some folks to just throw out what are 3 or so words when you hear that town that you think of. So Richfield. Rich, white, what else?
Exclusive.
Exclusive. Republican. Okay. It's okay. This is free space. I know they said it's being recorded, but they can't see you, so don't worry. I'm repeating the things that you're saying. So if anything, and you know, I'm so used to this now being in the public space because every time you say something, like at least on campus, the student newspaper is right there. So I'll be the one who'll take the heat for saying that Ridgefield is rich, white, Republican, and exclusive. Okay, so now we have that on recording, so you all will know to back me up. Okay, let's try another one. What about Bridgeport?
Urban decay.
Urban decay.
Dangerous.
Dangerous. What else?
Poor.
Poor.
Okay, school systems.
Okay, school systems, okay. You all were very generous with that one. It was so much nicer. The words were very, you know, with urban decay. Not, okay, school systems. You were so gentle and nice with those. Now, I will say that a lot of times when I do that same exercise with students, they're afraid. They're afraid to say what we all know to be the case because of the assumptions that we make, right? And while some of those things that we articulated may in fact be true, the reality is whether it's true or not, that is the perception or the assumption that we work under, right? So keep that in mind. What happens though as a result of some of those stereotypes or assumptions that we make is we will stereotype people, right? Doesn't matter who you are, but if you're from Bridgeport, we're thinking, your education must not be that great, right? Because you only have an okay school system, right? Or if you're from Ridgefield, we're thinking like you are made of money. I'm going out to lunch with you every day next week because you'll be paying. Happy hour, drinks on you, round one, let's make it happen, right? So that's the kind of stuff. But also we discriminate against people. Now discrimination, I would argue, is the action. Taking the stereotypes and assumptions that we know to be the case in our reality and actually acting on them, making a decision actively that impacts someone negatively, right? We ignore people. Now, I don't know if you all do this as much as we used to do in the corporate world, but everyone had their phones, and so you might see someone walking towards you, right? And suddenly you had the most important email or call because you didn't want to look at them. You don't want to make eye contact, right? So we ignore people. We also deny people opportunities. I know many of you are engaged oftentimes in interviewing candidates potentially. So how many times have you thought about someone who reminded you of someone else? And for that very reason, you're like, we're not going there again, right? We do it all the time. We also hurt others. Now, we may not say that in the workplace, but the reality is the residual impact of the things that we do based upon what we know or what we don't know is hurt. And then the final analysis is that we actually miss out. We oftentimes, because of the stereotypes or assumptions that we put forth, cause ourselves not to try things, not to engage with people who might enrich our lives in a special way, in a unique way, but because of what we've known or we think we know, we miss out. Now the reality is, and I don't know how many of you pay attention to this work, I live in it literally in every position that I've had, not intentionally, there has been a thread of working in the diversity and inclusion space. So whenever, there was an article that a colleague of mine shared on LinkedIn the other day. She took the Sunday New York Times, and literally in every section, there was an article, sports, food, news, local, that had something to do with race. Literally every single section. So it is so pervasive in our world, but it's important for you to know some of the facts. The Asian American population is growing. It is the fastest growing population. Now, in size, not as large as the Hispanic Latino population, but it is in fact growing. Here in the Hartford area I'm more familiar with, we have seen lots of immigration, not from your, sort of traditional China, Japan, but from Southeast Asian countries. So the population, while they may not choose to be lumped all together, and I'm sure that that almost any population could argue that they wouldn't want to be, we do include those individuals in the broader Asian American population. Now this is a point that I think is really critical as we go forward and think about our workforces and who we hire. The reality is for about 10 years now, women and people of color, broadly defined, those of African descent, Hispanic, Latino, of Asian descent, anyone essentially who does not identify as white, that population, underrepresented minorities, depending on what terms you want to use, have been the largest, or 70% of the net entrance to the workforce, which means that more often than not, almost 3/4 of new folks coming into the workforce are women or people of color. That totally changes the paradigm when you think about, in many instances, who's in leadership. Across all sectors, whether it's education and the corporate sector, typically white males are in leadership. Now you've got almost 3/4 of the new entrants to the workforce, so your new employees look very different than those in leadership. It's a real game change in our world right now. And also, women have been earning more bachelor's, master's, and doctorates than men since the 80s. So let's think about that for a moment. If, in fact, women have a higher percentage of the advanced degrees that are necessary to be in leadership positions, whether in this industry, or others, why is it that they're still not represented? And at minimum, the percentage within the population. Today at UConn, there are more women in our undergraduate population than men. And it's been that way for a couple of years. It's moving quickly towards 60-40. And so the reality is, what will our future workforce look like? Our workforce today is not quite equipped to deal with this, so we have a lot of work to do. And then the thing that I think, again, that speaks to this point about the future, last year for the first time, students of color, underrepresented students, made up the majority of students entering kindergarten in U.S. public education for the first time in the history of the Republic, like when the country was founded. So that should tell you something. Now, when I spoke to folks in the Department of Ed back in January, I showed a slide about the underrepresentation of teachers of color. I mean, it literally has been flat for about 3 decades now, while the student population is like this. So it's not just certainly in the court system, it is in education, it's in corporate America. We have a lot of work to do. But the reason that it all begins with us is that we are the ones who have the work to do. Now, I know there's some of you thinking in here, no, not me. You know, because everyone hates to think that they would be called something-ist or something phobic. Well, this is not what this workshop is really about. It's about cultural competency and bias. And those things that rear their ugly head, no matter what skin color we are, no matter what socioeconomic status, no matter what sexual orientation, what geography we're from, it rears its ugly head. Now, this is just more information about the Hispanic. On campus, we say Latinx. I don't know if that's consistent here. I have to remind people, after having been at UConn for only 15 months, that the way people speak on campus is not the way people speak in the real world. So I'm trying to go back and forth. I'm like, okay, Latinx, Hispanic, yes, all of N. The X is supposed to include the A and the O, so FYI, for those of you who have students in school and they come home talking about the Latinx community, you don't have to fight them. That is, in fact, a term that folks are using. But this population, I mean, we've been talking about this for decades, right? That first it was 2050, the United States was going to be majority minority. Then it was 2032, and now every year the number comes closer and closer and closer. So just things that we need to be mindful of as we think about our population. I'm going to go a little deeper into it. Okay. So one of the things that's most important about this work, as I talk about our workplaces, our teams, and how we work together, is that there actually is data that suggests that people who spend time with individuals from different backgrounds and experiences actually are better critical thinkers. They're better problem solvers. They're better with analytical skills, right? So that is something that has been statistically proven. This is not just, it's a nice to be because we want to have, one person of each group in a room. There's actually data to suggest that. And in the corporate landscape, what we talk about a lot is that there actually are statistics to prove that companies who have a diverse leadership team, who have women within their leadership team, who have people of color in their leadership team, outperform the S&P 500, outperform the Dow, like these very, very storied benchmarks of financial performance. And so even though we hear all of that, in spite of all of that we need to know, it seems that we still need to help people understand why it's critically important to have diversity within the workforce. In fact, employers continue to say that it's important, whether it's related to their own teams or to their customers, that the employees that come to them are comfortable working with people from a variety of backgrounds. One of the things that I used to describe that as is, for any of you who are Busta Rhymes fans, he has a song that talks about flip mode. Okay, so half of you are like, don't know who he is. Okay, so flip mode to me, when I would talk to students, I talk about the art of the flip mode and being able to navigate in two cultures, right? All of us do it. We have a way that we connect with our friends and our families at home, and we have a way that we operate within the context of the workplace. The challenge for us now is to take that same concept and be able to leverage it when we're working with our clients, when we're thinking about our communities, because some of the deep cultural behaviors that we have as people are rooted in our cultural background. And those will come out as we interact with people. So it's maybe not that your clients are being rude, although maybe they are in some cases, right? But maybe their cultural background suggests that they might treat you differently. And it's not intended to be discrimination, but we have to take that extra step to begin to learn where people are coming from, and the same of us. We talk a lot about the golden rule, do unto others as we would have them do unto us. But it's really much bigger than that, because Heather might not want to be treated the way I want to be treated. So I need to spend the time to get to know Heather so that I can determine how Heather wants to be treated. That's how we have to begin to react and to work and engage with one another. So now, I told you I did some research. I don't know how many of you can see because the print is kind of small. So the question of the day, is the judicial system free from bias? I see a lot of like, Well, the good news is that in 1996, there was an article about a panel that found, you guys ready? That there is bias in the Connecticut court system. I was like, now you know, when you Google and you type in things, like you don't expect to get exactly what you type in, right? I was like, oh my God. Now granted, it's 20 years ago, right? 10 years later, I found a document that the Florida court system put together on how to recognize and eliminate bias from the court system. So that's something that I'll share afterwards as a resource that you may want to take a look at. I think they did a really good job. But the fact of the matter is that 10 years after that, now here in 2017, we are still talking about this. Why? Because the world continues to change. There are different people that we have to think about. We play out things differently. But the fact remains, as we have discovered on campus, that in spite of the time passing, the issues remain the same. And at UConn, they've done this thing, I think over the past 40 years, called metanoia, which is a Greek word that speaks to sort of coming together to change heart. And the faculty will call a metanoia when there's something happening that we really need to address. So clearly we're having one now. But the interesting thing, as we've done the history to look at it, is we've had a metanoia about race 5 times since 1970. So we recognize that it's not an issue that we are clearly going to be able to solve, but yet it's an issue that continues to rear its ugly head. So the whole point of that is understanding, or cultural intelligence. Inteligencia cultural es muy importante. Un poquito de español. It's really, really important for us to understand who we are. We are not going to change in really large spades in this country, right? So the reality is that we've got to figure out how to interact with one another in the meantime. I think we all pray and hope that there will be large-scale change. But what we've come to see over time is that there are just different nuances to address, right? When we talk about pre-Civil Rights Act, there was, de facto segregation. Then it became de jure segregation. And so today, I don't know what we would even call it, but the fact of the matter is we still know that there is inherent implicit bias in the system and in our country. So what are we going to do about it? We know that the way to understand people, the research that I mentioned earlier, is to understand the differences and better relate to one another in order to, as they say in the business world, attract people to your products and services. But ultimately, when you are in a public-facing role and you are duty-bound to carry out the duties that you do, it's not that people choose to come to you. So the reality is that you have to find a way to interact with them that allows them to feel engaged and helps them to move forward and solve problems for a better end, right, ultimately. But the challenge for us individually, and why I say it comes down to us, is that we all practice similarity bias. Now, I know there are some of you in the room that when I first started talking about bias, were like, oh, I'm not biased. I'm sorry to break it to you. You are. We all are. And I know that I'm being recorded, but I am going to share with you one of the examples that I always tell people in just a moment. It'll be funny. We like to be around people who are like us. It's a natural human fact. So when you hear things like, you know, why do all the black kids sit together in the cafeteria? No one ever asks why all the white people sit together in the cafeteria. And I would argue they do it far more, right? In your offices, outside when you're driving and you see people gathered in restaurants, right? We choose not to acknowledge that because that's not different. But the reality is that's what we do. We like to be around people who are like us. Maybe it's not race. Maybe it's the geography, where we're from. Maybe it's people who like some of the same hobbies. Whatever it is, that's what we as human beings enjoy. Once we realize that and get past that, what we have to then begin to think about is how that plays out and how we act towards people, right, who may not be like us. That's when we start talking about implicit bias. Implicit bias are the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, our actions, our decisions, and they are unconscious. So you've got stuff, I've got stuff floating around in our heads that impacts the decisions that we make today, tomorrow, in the future. So here's the example. I'm going to share it, and yes, you know, Governor Malloy, hopefully I will still have my employment. I struggled when Governor Malloy was running for office because he looks like an old boss that I had that I could not stand. Now, how many of you have ever had the experience where you encountered someone new that reminded you of someone, but it wasn't positive, right? Somebody who you were like, oh, you remind me so much of, it could be your cousin even, my cousin so-and-so, who I can't stand. But yet now, you're in a situation where you have to work with them. And in the back of your mind, you're still thinking about that. So for a while, I've had an opportunity to meet him, to have conversation with the governor, to shake his hand on a number of occasions in professional and social settings. And I've had to tell myself, he is not that guy. Because honestly, now I've never asked him, because I should. They could be related. I don't know that for a fact. But when I tell you that he looks like him, he looks like him. And the reason that it really challenges me is that, and I should say, that person who I thought was such a bad manager actually taught me what it was to be a good manager. So I'm grateful for that experience at the end of the day, but I had to tell myself, this is not him every single time, right? And that's the stuff that plays out for us. You may have had a bad experience at some point in time or not, right? When I talk to students at UConn, I frequently remind them, you have come to this university from your small town, inner city, whatever the case it is. More than likely in Connecticut, you went to school with people who look just like you. White, black, Hispanic, Asian, more than likely, right? There are some communities that we have here where there's some diversity. And many of our communities like to tout that. I grew up in a community in Long Island that claimed that it was the most racially balanced high school. This is back in the late 80s, the most racially balanced high school in the state. And I was like, okay, I can count the Asian people on one hand. It's a whole family, Danny and Calvin Shea. And then I had an exchange student named Kenise that came from Columbia. I mean, really, it was black people and white people, pretty much. But as we got to high school, there was white flight. Many of the white students went off to parochial school, and the school became really majority African American. But that's what we think. The reality is we do. Most of the students here come from and have never even gone to school with people who don't look like them. We bring them to campus. They come to an office or a training class, right, for probation officers, and you may have never had any personal interaction with somebody who's not like you. So what comes to mind? What informs what you know about that person? Well, let's see. All the things that you've seen on TV. For the students, now I say on Instagram or YouTube, right? So if the only thing that somebody knew about you was based upon what they had seen on TV, or maybe on the news, or in the paper, would you be comfortable engaging, becoming transparent, trusting, which is what we have to do in the workplace, each other, when you're dealing with very, very challenging situations each day, you've got to trust each other, right? And I don't know that I trust you if you think of me as somebody that you've seen on Instagram, right? You don't know me. You haven't taken the time to know me. You may not be doing this on purpose, but that's your only experience. So we have to be really cognizant of the fact that no matter what age you are, there's an opportunity for you to learn. And that's why, again, I come back to it begins with you. What will you do to not only examine the biases that you have, but begin to work on them? So key characteristics of biases, these are things that are not going to surprise you. Most of the biases that we hold are actually pretty pervasive. Meaning you may not actually speak them out loud. You may not say that you think that such and such type of people are lazy, or people who went to this university or from this school district aren't smart. You may not say them, but they play out in the choices you make. Who do you want to be your partner? Who are you going to work with on a project that you have at work? Who do you feel comfortable if there's a situation that arises that you have to partner up and run out, that you would trust somebody? Who are you going to select? Well, if it's someone that you think is like a certain way based upon what you don't really know, why would you choose them? They're pervasive. They come out and you don't even realize it. I have a bias. I'm going to out myself again about people. Let me see, because there's guaranteed to be somebody in the room. Let me see if I can see one. Maybe not. Who have tattoos on their neck. Now, you would think that I work in judicial because I don't know what it is about when I see someone with a tattoo on their neck, I cannot think about anything else. And in my head, with my human resources background, these are the things I start thinking about. Oh gosh, I wonder if they thought about the kind of job opportunities they could have and what kinds of things they'll not be able to do because they have something on their neck. Why did they do that anyway? There's a whole bunch of other places on the body. What were they thinking about? And I'm not talking about a little cute sunrise at the base of your neck. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about you got an entire story of your life all up here. I will tell you, I am distracted. I am totally distracted. You could be talking, you could be telling me I won the Powerball, and I'm still trying to figure out why you did that. And were you going to forget your name? And why? These are all the things, right, going through my head. And there's this wonderful young man that works at the Dollar Tree near my house who has a tattoo on his neck. And it's God's way of testing me every single time I go in there. He is at the register, which should suggest that he's diligent, right? He's always on time at work. He's pleasant. He greets me every single time. Starts up a conversation. And I'm grateful for that because otherwise, what would I be doing? Looking at his neck. Now, I've seen it so many times now that you would think that I would be good, right? But that's what I'm talking about. These are the biases that we have. So there's a point where you have to say to yourself, and I had to tell myself again in this situation, Joelle, this brother is doing what he has to do, right? He is positive. He's cordial. He is always here, which means he's diligent. You've got to stop looking at his neck, right? Now, that's a small example, but I think that you all might be able to think about things that cause you to think the same way. Things that you can't even focus on the person because you're so distracted thinking about whatever it is or where they've come from. So how do we get to a point where we can have the conversations in an honest and open and trustworthy manner so you can get beyond that stuff and be able to get to know them for who they are? The reality is that also our biases don't always align to our beliefs. You know, lots of people are like, you know what, I'm a good person. I believe everyone should have equality and fairness. But at the same time, when you're walking down the street in Hartford, you are clutching your bag when you see a young black man in a hoodie, right? But you think everyone should be equal, and we all should have access to the same things, right? So inherently, you can believe one thing, but your biases will tell on you in a minute, right? Very, very much pervasive and not always in alignment with what we believe. In fact, as they say, and I'm not sure, I think there may be some in this room, but judges who have taken a vow to not be biased, guess what? They have biases. So the reality of the situation is individually we have to work at this. Your position title is not going to save you from it. The amount of time that you've been in this world or in this particular line of work is not going to save you from it. You have to do the work to save yourself from it. You can change them. That's the good news. You actually can change your biases. So you may believe something up to a point, but when you do the work to get the information that you need, you can actually change. Now, the problem is we may have already done the damage, right? The reality is that the implicit biases that we hold, when we act upon them, when we are decision makers, when we are the hiring individuals, or we have the ability to determine someone's fate, which many of you do every day, it can change the course of someone's life. What you think they are, what you think they have the capability to do or not. You have the power to make decisions that determine whether that's the case or not. And I know sometimes we get burned, right? Sometimes our gut tells us exactly what happens, but sometimes it doesn't. And that's the risk we've got to be willing to take, responsibly, of course. Now, in every situation, we have to be able to blame somebody. I already talked about the media, but you can also blame your mama and your grandmama and your uncle for helping you to form the biases that you have. You see, this is stuff that was being taught to us when we were younger. We didn't even realize it. When you were in the grocery store with your grandmother, or when you were out somewhere with your uncle and on a car ride, the things that people talked about, they reinforce these biases because in many instances, they too had been discriminated against. And so it was a way for them to tell you, make sure you don't ever go to this town. You certainly don't want to be there after dark, right? We have folks who are struggling. I'll be very honest with you now with the campus from West Hartford moving to downtown Hartford. We have people who are struggling. Oh my God, don't go 2 blocks. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I have worked in downtown Hartford before going to UConn for 16 years on the same block. One time do I remember there being an alert where someone's cell phone got stolen on the plaza. And we all kept thinking, well, how did you get your phone stolen on the plaza? What were you doing? Who was out on Constitution Plaza to steal your phone? But the one time in 16 years, and yet I'm helping some of our colleagues to work through the biases that they have about Hartford. And do you know how hurtful that is to their colleagues who are from Hartford? Many of whom who grew up within a stone's throw of the new beautiful downtown campus. Do you know how hurtful that is? And yet they don't even realize that now that impacts their interactions, right? We previously worked well together. You know, we were always on the same team. And now? So it totally impacts our day-to-day, and we don't even realize it. So yes, you need somebody to blame. You can always blame them. So this is a screenshot of the document that I found from the Florida court system, which I think is really well done. And it may be something that you all will want to take a look at, repurpose for Connecticut, if you don't already have something like this, as an outcome of this week of work, so that people have something to refer to, or those who weren't able to attend. I'm not going to mention any names. So we have to do the work to fight the bias that's living inside of our heads. The title of the workshop, we've talked about this a little bit, but I like to share the presentation, so I did put this in here so that you all will have it. But just essentially, what is cultural competence? It's really gaining the skills to be able to interact effectively with people who are different from us. And the other thing I would also argue is that some of us also make the mistake of assuming that just because someone looks like us, that we have similar cultural beliefs. And we should not do that either. So there is opportunity within group, because the other thing too, I did skip one of the real biases that plays out is that they actually happen in group too. So don't think that you don't have biases about people who are like you too, because we do that. Oh, you know, and I'll say black people, right? How many of us, oh, you know, right? We do that about our own group. So you have to be mindful about that as well as self-fulfilling prophecy. So our cultural competence, our ability to interact effectively, that flip mode, being able to navigate in different worlds. And there are different pieces of it. Thinking about your journey in cultural competence, if I would leave anything with you today, and I want to make sure that we have some time for questions or comments, is really awareness of who you are, your worldview. What are the limitations of where you've been, where you've come from, right? I always am amazed when I first moved to Connecticut. I met someone, I lived in Middletown, and I met someone who had said to me that the first time, after having been born in Connecticut, the first time that they went to Hartford from Middletown, they were 17 years old. And I was thinking, it's like 25 minutes away. You've never been? Well, and then I had to think about, well, there are transportation barriers, right? And certainly, 40 years ago in this state, there are many things that might have prevented, even some bias that might have prevented people from visiting. So thinking about what your worldview is, what is it that you don't know? And it may not be about simply going out of the country, because we talk a lot about that. There's a lot of emphasis on global and international, certainly with our children in the schools and providing them opportunities to learn other languages and that sort of thing. But do you realize how much Americans don't know about America? I was about to make a political statement. I'm going to keep on moving. There are a lot of things that we don't know about our own country and who are citizens here and all that kind of stuff, right? So there's an opportunity for you to do that work here, right? There are lots of things in Connecticut even that you might not have explored. I will tell you, coming from New York, my view of Connecticut was Greenwich, Stanford. I thought everybody was rich, never mind Ridgefield. I didn't even know that was. And I didn't know that black people lived here, except for Diana Ross. Now, this is back then, because she lived in Greenwich, right? Okay. So literally, that was my worldview of Connecticut. Now, 20 plus years in, there are so many hidden treasures about this state that I would have never known. So examining what you know and from what vantage point it's there. And then what your attitudes are about other places, right? So if you decide to, or you suggest to one of your colleagues, they should really check out this great restaurant in Bridgeport. We'll use that since that was our example from earlier. And they're like, I don't think I would go there. So what are our attitudes about those things? We say we want to be culturally competent and that we want to expand our worldview, but what's keeping us from actually doing it? So we've got to examine those attitudes. And then really taking on the knowledge, taking the opportunity to learn. I had a colleague at Travelers who is from the northern part of India. And to that point, and I felt horrible as a diversity practitioner, when I would always say when people would offer, oh, where do you want to go to dinner? And I was like, anything but Indian. Now, that was my ignorance because I'd never had Indian food. So I was afraid that I would get in a situation, and I'm a foodie and I like to eat, and I don't like to make a bad decision when it's time to eat. So I would have been hungry and disgusted and that whole thing. What I realized, though, is that I had to get beyond that. She was good enough to come with me to, they changed the name, I think, right on Main Street in Hartford, and they have a buffet. And she walked me through all of the different foods, which were akin to northern India, which were akin to southern India. What spices were the things that I might not like, which would cause me to say, oh, I don't like all Indian food. That's the same kind of thing that causes people to say, I don't like all fill-in-the-blank people, right? Because it may be one thing. And when you can isolate whatever that thing is, then maybe you just realize, oh, that's just not my preference, but not that you have damned an entire group of individuals or a location, right? So these are the things, I mean, food is one of those things that's an easy entry point, but it's not where you stop. It's a way for you to enter into understanding people and why they've made choices about things. And it'll allow you some access to cultures differently in an easier way than maybe having to fly or travel there. But it is a way. So expanding your worldview, what can you do? What choices can you make to allow you to get more information about other places? And then finally, practicing those skills. You have to do it at some point, right? Each of us, when we came into our professional environment, had to learn the pace of play in that environment, what language was appropriate, and hopefully you had someone as a mentor to guide you. Same thing here. You got to practice the skills. You know, don't walk up to the first person that's different from you and say, hey, I want to know everything about you. They're not going to tell you because you've got to build trust first, right? But practice with your colleagues, people that you know. How much do you really know about them? And how much do they know about you? And I get it. Some of us are very private people. But I think the best way for us to learn is to learn from people who we trust. And some of your coworkers you probably spend more time with than maybe even family or friends. I mean, the reality of our work life is that we do. So it is an opportunity and a way to learn about people. Another thing to keep in mind, and then I'm going to move so we can have an opportunity to talk a little bit, is just some examples of cultural meaning and impact. And I alluded to this earlier in terms of people who come from different backgrounds and experiences and may play out things differently than you. So thinking about the fact that when you're in a meeting, if someone is not giving you direct eye contact, in American culture, we would assume that that person is not engaged, right? Maybe they're not listening. Well, the reality is that, did you know there are some cultures where if you look at a person, or you should not look at someone who is your superior, because it's considered to be disrespectful, right? So those of you who do interviews, or you're meeting people, or even connecting with your clients, maybe that's the story, right? So thinking about those things. This one on the screen is an example of a proverb that is like the opposite, but we have to think about. So here in Western civilization, you would hear about the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So the person who makes the most noise, I would say, you know, my 10-year-old is that kid in class who's like, ooh, 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 always wants to be called on, right? So that's a very Western American concept, that you have to be loud, you have to be seen and heard. Contradictory, there is a Japanese proverb that says the nail that stands out gets hammered down. So there's no benefit to standing out and doing that. So imagine a Japanese person comes into a very westernized American meeting, classroom, etc. Now they're looking at the people who are doing the ooh, 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 who that's what we've been told to do, that's how we've been taught, and thinking, there's no good end to that, right? So how do we reconcile the different places that we come from when we come into a workplace? Is that we have to take the time to learn about one another. Nobody is going to be able to read this. This is little tiny words, and that's why I said that I wanted to share some of the stuff, but just the different stages of cultural competence. So literally where you begin, that whole awareness piece and recognizing, what does culture mean? I've used a lot of different terms throughout our conversations today. So for your workplace, what are the terms that resonate for you? Do you still use minority? In our world of social media today, sometimes there's certain words that people will say, no, I can't believe you said that. Well, the reality is we have no common language around this. So every time people try to make progress and have a conversation, they make mistakes, they trip, or they don't say anything because they're afraid that they won't say the right thing. So what is it that for your workplace you can agree on? What are some terms that will be helpful to you? What does culture mean? In some instances, when we're talking about cultural competency, we're talking about lots of different things, not just race. We're talking about race and age and geography and all kinds of things, right? There are lots of dimensions of diversity. But what exactly does that mean? Because in some places, people look at diversity and are like, oh God, we're going to be talking about race the whole time, right? But it's so much. There's also the reality that there are clearly groups of people who have been historically underrepresented in the systems and structures of this country. So not only are we trying to navigate finding ways to learn about one another, but we also are trying to address the fact that there were barriers that literally prevented some of us from even being at the table. So it's two trains running. That's why we talk about diversity and inclusion a lot. Diversity, yes, we want to make sure that there's access, that there are people at the table who represent a variety of backgrounds. But inclusion is about what we do with that. It's kind of like diversity is the mix and inclusion is what you do with it. Or diversity is getting invited to a party and inclusion is being asked to dance, right? There are a lot of different analogies that people use out there. It's taking that next step to ensure that while you've removed the barriers to access, that you don't still have barriers to full participation and full engagement. That's the work that we're really challenged to do. So terms is definitely something I think that would be helpful as you go forward so you can avoid those missteps and really talk about the real issues that prevent people from being at the table. Managing your own biases, like I said, do the work. I will challenge each of you as you leave this workshop or this whole session today, think about what are some things that you're biased about. Think about the stereotypes that you still hold on to. Still. Challenge yourself. You don't have to tell anybody, but think about it. And think about how it might play out differently if you retrained your thoughts as you encounter folks within your work setting. And then from a work perspective, in terms of the whole organization, you're accountable not only to each other, but certainly to the citizens of this state. Bless you. There's a lot of impact and influence that each and every one of you have in your day-to-day responsibilities. And so, I hate to make it seem really heavy, but, we all share in this responsibility to not only create a workplace that's inclusive, but also to be able to have that carry over into the individuals who come in contact with you and leave. So, ultimately, this is kind of the goal when I think about what it means to be culturally competent and to really begin to be free from bias. I mean, none of us are really fully free from bias, but to really begin to think about it, to really think about what it means to come together in community as you all have done for this Diversity Week. Kudos to the committee for putting it together, because we have to be courageous and have these conversations about this work. And if we don't, unfortunately, create opportunities for folks to do it, we won't. And so it's important that you all brought it to the forefront. Be a role model and lead the way. It doesn't matter what your title is. Be a role model and demonstrate the workplace that you want to be, the colleague that you want to be, the family member that you want to be. And then just continuous learning. So, as I said earlier, we're all still learners. We're all students, no matter how old you are. It's never too late to begin to think differently about what it is out there that's available for you to learn. So this was just kind of a quick overview of some of the things that really are pretty critical to us when we think about the deeper work that we're doing. And I hope that there's something that you heard or learned this morning that you'll continue to think about and will help you to do your work in a more impactful and engaging way. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'm happy to take any questions or any comments that folks might have.
Yes. I was wondering if there's any studies or any statistics in regards to the children of color who are bused out from the city who go to suburban schools in regards to how that positively or negatively impacts them.
That's interesting because I was really interested in that. When I did my master's, it was about the whole desegregation of schools and how that's impacted our school districts and some of the programs that have been done. I don't know specifically at this point in particular about Connecticut, but I do know the person that runs that program at CREC. So I'm happy to connect and see if there's anything that they have on either their CREC website, or I can certainly get back to the committee and share. But I think that, that's critically important. If we talk about education as, whether we're talking about the funding, the school financing, or we're talking about the race of the town as being able to provide a better education, that's problematic, So how do we, that's a whole other workshop for another day. I have lots of thoughts about that and how things have played out here in Connecticut. When I was an undergrad, Hartford was a case study. I have an education policy undergraduate degree, and we used Hartford as a case study. It was the year when the school district was taken over by a private company for the first time. And we all know the ebbs and flows of where that's going, right, to where we are now. But I think that's a critical point. I mean, is it really I know students, when I worked at Inroads, who had done choice and had been Hartford but went to school in Farmington or Simsbury, and some of them were unable to really participate in the fullness of the activities because they simply did not have transportation that would allow them to do so. So does it make it better just because you have a high school degree from a school system that's better, or does it make you a better, well-rounded person to have had access to opportunities? So there's a real, there's some challenges related to that. It's not a perfect storm, and I think there's just significantly more and more work that needs to be done in that area. Yes.
So just a comment on your perspective on similarity bias. I don't know if you're aware of the Yale study where it showed a toddler and they had two bears, and one of the bears was did something bad to the other bear, and the child picked the bear that was the victim. And then they showed the bad bear that liked same cereal as the child, and the child picked the bad bear. And it seems to be that because of similarity bias, when you have something in common, you're more likely to accept bad behavior from that person. Wow. And we kind of see that a little bit in leadership.
Yeah.
We kind of see it in the Weinstein situation.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that we don't do enough to explore the impacts of similarity bias overall.
Absolutely. Yeah, as a society, I think we prefer things in neat packages. So if we can, and that's why this whole challenge that we have around, bias and diversity and inclusion is that it really is asking us to dismantle the existing structures that we created in order to make society work the way folks want it to work. And so there's an inherent conflict in that. The more we talk about the importance of understanding, right, who we are and that everyone is not a group and that everyone is not a label and that everyone acts a certain way within that label, the more we understand that, the more it cuts at the existing structures of society that have been created the way that they are. So it's interesting. I think that that research is something that we should share and really think about, what makes us support behavior that we know is not good behavior, and what would help us to instead of supporting that behavior, how could that young child, for example, have said to the bear, listen, I know we like the same cereal, but what you did to the other bear was wrong. How do you create a space for us to be able to dialogue with each other in that way? Thanks for sharing. Yes.
I was in prior to CREC, it was Project Concern. There's a voluntary school program. I went to special school for 6 years, 20 miles each way. We did have a support system to play sports programs where they provided transportation. It was a unique experience for me, and it helped me throughout my life. But it was also a good experience for the kids out of the school.
Absolutely.
So it helped them in their lives.
Absolutely. We talk about that all the time, particularly on campus with, as we wrestle with the need to, or certainly the diversity of the student population increases every year. But we still struggle with faculty diversity and staff diversity. So, and not necessarily simply because it's important for underrepresented students to see people. There's real strong data around that says people need to see people who look like them in leadership that they can aspire to, right? It allows you, it motivates you to move forward. But there's also real data that talks about, majority students who've never had a leader who is a woman or a person of color. And if they have, their ability to see leadership in different forms rather than to see it in one particular way. So it's critically important, not just for underrepresented students, but for all of our students. And that's what the data supports, is that we actually perform better. We're smarter, we're more capable, we're better problem solvers, we're better critical thinkers when we have the capacity to embrace and understand different perspectives. So yeah, I think I'm sure it changed your life in a way that you had to deal with and think about things that other students never had to, and that gave you the ability to be motivated and move forward in a different way.
Even prior to that was a great experience for me, but for some reason my parents, from a young child, put us in a variety of people different from us. And it built, and I spent 20 years in the military, and I was that was just crazy, dealing with different cultures. You show up in the military, you meet people. I never seen a black man. It didn't freak me out. When somebody called me out a name, it didn't freak me out.
Right.
I could deal with it. I had a situation where it was almost a riot because somebody wrote a bad thing on the pool table, and blacks took offense to it. And I'm like, so what? It came down to there was going to be a fight, and I didn't allow the people to fight inside the dormitory because there was too much furniture there where they could use it. Put them outside, let them fight, get rid of the anger.
I thought you were going to say you stopped the fight altogether. I'm like, oh man.
I wish I could, but I had to let they wanted to fight.
Yeah.
And I let two people fight. It was the person that admitted to doing it. In my heart, I don't believe he did it. He just said he did it. He didn't like blacks per se, but he just said he did it just because.
People don't know why, and that's the whole issue with you know, some of the ignorance that we're seeing, and why, you know, I think people are being coached not to immediately respond, because there are some things that people are doing and saying, we see this on campus, that they don't really even understand. They know that that particular image is offensive to you, but they don't necessarily do it because they know that that's what they're doing. They do it because they think they can get away with it. You know, we see a lot of swastikas on campus, and you know, I can't imagine that everything is against the Jewish community, but I think people know that's a symbol of hate. So they're going to put that up. They're going to put a Confederate flag up, you know. So they know that's a symbol of hatred. They want to get you. They want to push you to move. And we're trying to help students to understand, and to your point, really kind of, you know, diffuse some situations when you recognize, report it as bias. We have a bias protocol where students can actually submit anything that's not, it doesn't have to meet the state statute, but if it feels like bias to you, you need to tell us about it, so that we can be mindful about the ways that people are choosing to antagonize in this particular day and age. This is a very challenging time that we're in our country, and I think, you know, each of us have a role to play in the context of how we process, both personally, right? There's a lot of trauma and emotional baggage and PTSD that goes along with racism and sexism and homophobia and all that other stuff. Again, unconsciously, stuff you don't even know is playing out. So we have a lot of work to do around that whole concept, and how you can respond so that you can not, you know, do harm to yourself in the long run, you know, not necessarily physically, but psychologically. It's a lot. That was very academic. It's a lot. Any other thoughts? All right, well, right on time, 11:29, I think, to get you to your next session. Thank you very much.